committee meeting, and Commissioner Reed is our chairman, so he will kick us off.
Thank you and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I see we have a full quorum today. Mayor Muntz, myself, and Commissioner Walker are here, as well as looks like we're the only ones other than staff. We only have one issue to talk about today, and that would be the second amendment to the lease agreement with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which we refer to as NOAA at our airport. And I see that we have Palmer as well as Ramona here, who will be addressing this issue today for us.
I can kick this one off, Commissioner Reed.
All right. Well, thank you, Ramona. The floor is yours.
This second amendment with NOAA, if you recall, last year the commission approved a lease agreement with which expanded their footprint at the airport, added space to their additional lease with this second, and then subsequently there was a first amendment done which just added exhibits and some construction drawings. This second amendment now seeks to reflect final costs and include the lease commencement date, which was going to be based on the substantial completion of this project, and also solidify the rent payments. The lease will have a retroactive effective date from February 1st, 2021, and will continue for a term of 20 years with a firm 15-year term. The rent collected from NOAA is divided up into a number of different components. That includes the building shell rent, tenant improvement rent, operating costs, and building specific amortized capital. The building shell rent remains fixed for the 15-year period of the lease, and that rent is on 176,418 square feet, for a total of $1,520,723.16 per year. Then if NOAA decides to remain and renew that lease for an additional 5-year, the remaining 20-year term, the rent for years 16 to 20 is subject to increase to an amount of $1,794,171.06 per year. Also included in that is the tenant improvement rent component, which totals $824,975.88. That captures the investment that the airport originally funded that improvement at a rate of 2.25%. That's amortized over the 15-year period. The amount is comprised of unamortized remaining improvement costs by NOAA from the existing lease of $1,539,050.66, in addition to other expansion costs, which total $8,955,467. Pursuant to the lease, also NOAA will remain responsible for operating costs, which include utilities and janitorial costs, which is totals $298,146.40 per year. That's subject to increases every 5 years based on the CPI change or actual operating costs from the preceding 5 years, whichever is greater. And you'll see all those costs broken down in that chart in your memo. And we would ask for favorable approval of the second amendment.
Thank you. Thank you. Ramona, I have a question. Go that $854,000 number again. What is that for? That's an unamortized amount you were saying?
Are you talking about the tenant improvement amount of $824,975.88?
No, it's the next one, next 800,000 you were talking about.
Commissioner Reed, is it the $8,955,467?
That might be it. I knew it was.
Yeah, it looks like 2 zeros are left off of that remaining.
That's the total investment that NOAA has made into the expansion component that we just completed, and that's what's being. They're paying back with the $824,000 over that 15-year period.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess there's this is basically a fixed amount, but it is a triple net lease per se. But we're not getting any increase on our land like we normally do. Is that a fair statement?
Well, actually, we took for the $8.62 that's flat for 15 years, we actually took the average of what we originally had proposed at, I believe, $7.50 a square foot. And then it would increase over that 15-year period to $9.46, and we just took the average, and they were willing to they just wanted to pay it fixed over the 15 years and not have it fluctuate up and down, or up.
Okay, let's see. I don't see my committee members on the film right now. I would like to make note that Commissioner McCauley and Madden and Salvage are here and attending as well.
So are Commissioner Walker and Muntz.
Okay.
I'm here. We're here.
Okay,
Make
good.
a motion to approve.
Do I hear a second? Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand because we're virtual. It passes unanimously. We have no other order of business today unless there's some particular issue either of my members wish to discuss. It appears as though there is none, and we will adjourn our meeting at 8:24.
Which gives us 6 minutes before we start our agenda study at 8:30. So we will pause. It would be a good time to get a coffee.
Hey, Chad.
Good morning. How's it going?
I was excited about Asher and to see his sweet little face.
Thank you. It was an exciting day. We knew.
Commission for our March 1st, 2021 meeting. We'll open at 3 o'clock, and our first presentation will be from Risk Management on our Health and Wellness Connection by Joyce Diaz for that. And then we'll do our Beautification Awards, residential and commercial, and we have a purchasing proclamation for March, or yes, for March. I think it's for March. And then we will have our committee report. Then the first item on will be our consent agenda. So let's take a look at those. They include the minutes, the asterisk items, and on page 3 of your agenda, items C1 and 3, and then in utility C1 and 2. So if you could, let's City Attorney Davis look at items miscellaneous report C1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've heard about the Clearwell project out at TB Williams Water Plant a number of times. Just basically a change order to our agreement with Tetra Tech, who is the design engineer on that project. During the course of construction, several modifications and upgrades have been identified that will make this a better project. And so we're asking them to do the design work to facilitate that. One of them is that Lakeland Electric has indicated that the transformers out there are getting old, and while all the electrical work's being done, it makes sense to go ahead and put in new transformers for that project. Then other items are just value engineering items that have been identified that are going to require some additional engineering work. So the total increase in the cost to be paid to Tetra Tech is $92,941, which will bring the total cost of engineering services for the project to $1,418,470. I think David Bayhan's on the call if you have any technical questions about the project.
Are there any questions from the commission on this? And is there, give me a thumbs up. Yes, Commissioner Reed.
You're
still muted.
We're on 1C?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I just didn't, okay. Thank you.
Any questions on this item at all that need amplification? And is it okay to leave it then on the consent agenda? If so, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, we will do so. Item 3, sir.
All right, item 3 is an extension of the lease with the state of Florida to allow the current DMV office and Florida Highway Patrol Station at this location to continue to be there at least through July 1st of 2024. The existing lease has been going on since 1971, and it's finally scheduled to expire in July of this year. And the state has contacted us about extending that. I think you're probably all familiar with this location. Some of you probably got your driver's license there to contest originally. Up on Lakeland Hills, full options to extend the lease. And otherwise, all the terms and conditions would remain in effect. They're responsible for all the maintenance and repairs. They do not pay any rent for this location. And that's been the case since the inception.
I found that interesting. Okay, are there any comments on that? Leave it on consent agenda. It is the host of many of our children's memories, as well as our own. Okay, and that brings us down to utility C1. Ramona?
Yeah, this first agreement is with United Rentals. This is for the rental of heavy construction equipment for the Bridgewater substation project. The city's purchasing department procured this rental contract with United through Sourcewell, which is a municipal contracting agency that affords local government agencies to get better pricing. And then while the equipment will actually be used that pursuant to this particular agreement for the Bridgewater substation, this agreement with United Rentals can also be used citywide for other projects that would require heavy construction equipment. Specific to this project, this Lakeland Electric is seeking to rent a wheel loader, an excavator, a track loader, a forklift, and a single drum smooth roller. So that's part of the cost, which will be $15,333 per month for a total cost of $107,331, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget. And that project will be that equipment will be used. It's estimated for the next 7 months to complete the project.
Any questions on that? Do you want to leave that on the consent as well? If so, signify by a thumbs up. All right, that's unanimous. So we'll leave that one on. Number 2, please.
The second item is a task authorization with Trinity Consultants. This is for the implementation of environmental software. Trinity initially helped with Ellie with the selection process for vendors for this software, which is actually through it's a Gen Suite. The second phase that Trinity will be assisting with is helping with the implementation, which is why the first year is a bit more costly and is estimated at about $111,000. Just for background purposes, the environmental tracking software is used for compliance reasons with federal and state regulations. And incidentally, Lakeland Electric has never had this type of software and has relied solely on individuals and calendaring as reminders for compliance issues. So the hope is that this environmental tracking software will alleviate any compliance issues and ensure that we stay on track. And all this is pursuant to a continuing contract that the City Commission already approved back in 2019. So that's why you're seeing this task authorization, and this is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 2021 budget.
None. Although, yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Ramon, now does this complement, as it may sound like it is to support what we did back in 2019? Is that what you're saying, basically?
Well, we had a continuing contract with Trinity back then, but they were involved in the first phase of the project, which isn't part of this $111,000, was that they actually helped Lakeland Electric go through the selection process for the vendor that will actually be providing the software. So this second phase is just strictly to help Lakeland Electric implement that compliance software.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions? Since it's compliant and it is a task authorization, is that something you want to leave on the consent agenda? If so, signify by raising your thumbs. Commissioner Madden, do you have a different thought on? Okay, good. All right, thank you. So that's unanimous. So we leave that in place. Let me ask City Attorney Davis a question. Since we have some other attorneys on the line, could we address item C2 now, just to help let their day move on?
That's the hospital lease amendment?
Yes, sir.
Certainly.
Is that all right with the commissioners to take this out of order? Okay, let's go ahead then, sir. And when you present that?
Okay, let me just get to that location. All right, this is the major amendment to the hospital lease with Lakeland Regional Medical Center and their parent company, Lakeland Regional Health. It provides for the prepayment of all rent and other payments due under the existing lease, beginning with the upcoming fiscal year 2021-2022 through 2039-2040. They will make a payment of $215 million in full satisfaction of all rent and payments due for that time period. Thereafter, the lease will be extended in perpetuity, and the rent obligation and other payments due under that extension will be $10 per year. Let me just give you some background on the legal situation on this, and then we'll go in a little more into the financial budgetary implications, and city manager will address those. This is an agreement that was originally entered into. The lease was entered into in October of 1986, and it's scheduled to expire on September 30th of 2040. It calls for the parties to enter into good faith negotiations beginning October 1st, 2036, to address a possible extension of the lease. And there are actually three basic options that are available to the parties the way the lease is currently written when this comes up for expiration. The first option is to enter into a lease extension with LRMC for a 25-year extension. And what the lease provides is that any extension, under any extension, the rent and other payments under that extension shall be consistent with payments then being made by other acute care not-for-profit hospitals in Florida, which lease their facilities from governmental entities such as counties, municipalities, and hospital districts. So that's your first option, is a lease extension under those terms and conditions. Your second option would be to sell the hospital to LRMC, and the language in the lease relating to that provides that the city and LRMC would retain a nationally recognized healthcare appraisal firm to develop the fair market value of the property. And once the parties agreed on that, a sale would occur. The hospital or LRMC would be entitled to a credit against that purchase price for all rent and payments that LRMC has made to the city since the lease's inception in 1986 through the date of the sale to the hospital. So that's your second option. Failing either one of those, the third basic option is that the city would have the right to either lease or sell the hospital to a third party, someone entity other than LRMC, or actually the city could also take over operations of the hospital itself. All of this is complicated, as I indicated in my memo, by state law on addressing the lease or sale of a municipal hospital. And what state law provides is that upon the sale or lease of a municipal hospital, 50% of the proceeds of that sale or lease must be deposited into a healthcare economic development trust fund. And then the other 50% of the net proceeds have to be deposited into a fund for the delivery of indigent care in the community. It's very important to note, however, that there is an exemption to those restrictions on the lease or sale proceeds for an existing lease, which is what the city has with LRMC. So the city can continue to lease the property as is with LRMC or enter into a lease extension with LRMC and avoid the effects of that state statute. So the practical effect of the statute is that unless that governing statute changes, the city's options would be to extend the lease to LRMC or sell to a third party and be subject to the effects of that statute. So with that legal and contractual background, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who will address the financial and budgetary implications of this.
Thank you, Palmer. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. So just as Palmer stated, to discuss some of the budgetary and financial implications that would be related to the amendment of this agreement, given the favorable interest rates prevailing in the current economic climate, the city and the hospital have been engaged in discussions over the last several months of a possible full prepayment under the lease and transfer agreement that would both relieve the hospital of ongoing payments under the lease and provide the city with certainty in the face of the contractual and statutory restrictions that Palmer discussed a moment ago. Myself, city manager, and our finance director, Mike Brossart, have performed an extensive analysis of the city's public improvement fund and have concluded that, and commissioners, these assumptions that I'm about to cover, I've had an opportunity, both Mike and I, to speak with each one of you individually, but it's just very important, again, to highlight the fact that these are the assumptions. So when we look at any risk factors, these would be the risk factors involved, though we feel confident in the assumptions that we have calculated into this agreement. The assumptions include a 6% rate of return on the hospital's prepayment. It's very important to point out that also would then anticipate no drawdowns of the principal, $215 million in the future. And also the assumption that growth in the city's public improvement fund cost would not increase by more than 1.75% in any subsequent fiscal year beyond 2030. A prepayment in the amount of $215 million will enable the city to continue to fund projected capital, maintenance, and repair needs within the public improvement fund for the foreseeable future, with some programmed capital expenditures being significantly reduced or removed to balance with the prepayment amount. So again, in some of those individual discussions, we've highlighted some of the capital expenditures that were previously programmed in that we would need to significantly reduce or remove from the public improvement fund in order to make this agreement sound for the city. Additionally, should these assumptions not be met and absent other mitigating options at that time, a shortfall in the transfer from the public improvement fund to the general fund could occur, resulting in reduced general fund revenue. The hospital has agreed to a prepayment in the amount discussed in full satisfaction of all payments otherwise due and owing under the lease agreement for the time period beginning in fiscal year 2022 and continuing through fiscal year 2040. Under this amendment, the hospital will make a payment to the city in the amount presented on or before October 1st, 2021. So those are the budgetary impacts and the risk assumptions that the finance director and I have calculated and had individual discussions with the commission. With that, I will turn it back over to Palmer for any more comments, and then of course stand for questions.
I don't think I have any else to add right now. I'll stand for any questions though. I think you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
My space bar, that didn't work. Commissioner Selvage and then Commissioner Walker.
Palmer and Sean, what restrictions, if any, are in place to prohibit or restrict future city commissions from drawing into the principal and not relying only on the interest?
I don't think there is a whole lot that you could do to bind future commissions. We've done some things in the past on a much smaller scale, you know, paying some money into the pension plan and things like that. But you know, that's obviously a much smaller dollar amount. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot you can do to bind future commissions.
Thank you.
I think it's a practical matter. However, if we wanted to continue the quality of services that comes from the public improvement fund and we did a drawdown, then we are forced to go to millage or some other way of raising taxes for those things. So the pressure on the commission would be to let it suffice out of its own planned funding in the years ahead. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question probably is very closely related to what your comment you just made, Mr. Mayor, and that is, Mr. Shiraz, the risk that I think that we talked about in our one-on-ones regarding the PIF and those particular capital improvements that we were looking at capturing. What are some of those things that do we know anything known at this point that we would look at possible challenges that we will face as a result of the actual sale as we look at this particular movement happening? Anything you know of right away? You know, you mentioned something that may be pushed back or something that we need to maybe look at later. Anything known right away?
Yes, sir. In the current 10-year capital improvement plan within the PIF, there were projects that were already scheduled that, as I stated earlier, would have mostly, for the most part, not been completely removed, but have been significantly reduced. So one example of that would be the need for a fire station in the North Lakeland area north of the interstate. That was a project that was programmed into the 10-year capital improvement plan within the PIF at a much higher amount. And so in order to make this agreement, you know, work and get to the terms that have been negotiated for quite some time, we've had to significantly reduce the program funding for that. Now, we didn't completely remove it. Obviously the first step is finding is land acquisition. And so we were able to leave programmed in, and I'll ask Mike to shake his head or confirm. I think we were able to maintain $1 million for land acquisition, but design and construction beyond that have been removed. So there's an example of the type of projects that previously were funded out of the PIF, maybe not totally out of the PIF, but at least partially out of the PIF, that we wouldn't have the opportunity to do any longer, beyond this agreement, in order to make it work. So that's one example. Another example, real quick, that the commission's all aware. We've been working for several years to find park space, recreational space in the southwest portion of the community. And so another example where we had programmed in monies into the PIF and the capital improvement plan for that. And so we've had to reduce the amount for that particular project as well. So there's just a couple of examples. There are some others, and funding for those projects will now have to come from other sources outside of the PIF if the commission were to accept this agreement.
And certainly appreciate those comments and want to make sure, because I have a concern that, we have a hospital who does very well and continue to do very well with the support of, what we have in our particular community of those with indigent care, and has been very, I think very supportive and continue to be supportive with being able to be there for those particular situations. And I wanted to make sure I heard if we should have this particular movement to take place, those particular things that we would have to be concerned about as we move forward with our capital improvement plan for different situations, such as the ones you just mentioned. I'd like to hear, if I could, Mr. Mayor, even more among my colleagues as, we look at these kind of situations and, how we can best make this a win-win for all of us, of course. Certainly appreciate what, has been brought forward to us at this point.
Let me do an immediate comment on that, and then I'll get to commissioners. This is certainly something that required a lot of ability to figure out how we could reschedule, and also even think about how we might be able to use some other resources differently to lower costs in the capital improvement plan going forward. So that's the sacrifice on the city's part in terms of getting to this number. From the hospital standpoint, it's an advance well above net present value for them to prepay the lease. And that acceleration was designed to try and meet at a number where we could accomplish those things. So I think in any good negotiation, you want both parties to feel like they wish they had gotten a little more than they got, but found the middle ground to get there. And I think this number kind of represents that. And I know Mr. Brossart worked diligently with City Manager Strauss to try and get to those kinds of projects and weighing them out. And the value of the hospital, the reason for that, for the hospital, is that it allows them to have enhanced bond ratings, because this is always an issue every year to have this high lease compared to anything nationally in place, lower interest expense that allows them, even though they're prepaying more than the net present value for the lease, to be able to reduce the costs, operating costs for them going forward, and be able to provide higher community quality of care. So that's kind of how you get into that middle piece. Commissioner McLeod and then Commissioner Selich.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was going to ask to hear from Ms. Drummond and the hospital. You elaborated on some of that, but I think it'd be important for us just to hear from their perspective. Sean and Mike Palmer, I thank you all for the work you put into this, to bringing this to us. I know I'm not alone in thinking of the hospital lease as one of the most challenging issues I think, for this commission to try and resolve in the coming years. And so I see this as a win for both sides, as a solution that brings certainty into the equation. Palmer, I did want to clarify, because when there are questions about extending the lease, and if I heard you correctly, that a lease extension would have to follow terms that are similar to other municipal leases like this. And so if under that, I mean, just to point out, if you look out across Florida, to my knowledge, and even other states, you don't find municipalities that have a hospital lease of $14, $15 million a year. And so that's been a luxury for the city of Lakeland. This is an opportunity for us to have that lump sum, that certainty, but at the same time, it unwinds the lease. And from a public policy standpoint, I mean, to me, this, I've always struggled with the pulling $14, $15 million out of your community safety net hospital. So if there's a way for us to solve this now, I think it makes sense. But I did want to clarify that, Palmer, and then ask Danielle if she would just weigh in as well.
So the clarification is what the terms have to be for a lease extension?
Correct. Just to point out that if a lease extension, we would be looking at, what are other municipalities, what does their lease look like? When you have, I think Tampa General is, I don't know if it's $1, $100, but it's some, minimal amount that would play into the equation for a lease extension in 2040.
That's correct. I mean, most other similar leases are for a more nominal amount of rent. So that is correct. I mean, that is only one of three options that we would have at the end of the lease. But if the lease extension is the option chosen, then the payments from LRMC would definitely be much smaller than they are now.
Correct. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
And then, yes, I'd be happy to, absolutely, I'd be happy to share a few comments. Can you hear me okay? First of all, I do think, we have appreciated greatly the opportunity to work with the city on this challenging issue. I have worked closely with Sean over the last several months as we've worked towards, coming up with an agreement, as the mayor described, that we both feel can be a win-win for the hospital and the city at this point in time. And I do think it's particularly important for both entities right now. Obviously, we are in uncertain times in many ways, and I think that this does provide certainty for both parties, given where we are. We also have some key initiatives that are underway that are going to be a financial burden, one of which we were talking about a little earlier with our, investment in behavioral health. This is a service line that is much needed, but, it does create a financial loss for us. But again, recognizing our role as a safety net provider of healthcare in this community, we want to provide all healthcare services regardless of the financial performance. So, certainly would allow us to continue with those plans. And then as well, we're very hopeful to be moving forward soon with our plans to become a teaching hospital. And there's a lot of startup costs associated with bringing these, medical residents here into the community. But overall, the impact of starting that program here locally, for the community would be tremendous. So again, I appreciate the ability to have this discussion and certainly happy to answer any additional questions.
Mr. Selvage.
Thank you. Sean, given that the $215 million is more than the net present value of the lease, what is the figure if you took the current lease terms and extended the dividend or the money we receive in that lease term, that figure compared to the $215 million at 6% over the same time in the lease?
It assumes some assumptions. I know you're asking that of Mr. Troust. That might be a good Rosart question.
Commissioner Selvage, good morning, everyone. Commissioner Selvage, I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but I'm going to try to interpret, and then correct me if I'm wrong. Coming into this fiscal year, I believe the hospital, on an absolute basis, the hospital contract was for $349 million and change through 2040. if you back out this current year, you're probably at 335-ish. If you apply a discount rate to that, and that's what we're really talking about, is what's the net present value at some amount. And with respect to the mayor, saying that it's below net present value depends on who you're talking to about what net present value is. It's a little over 4% discount rate. I can endorse $215 million. The hospital can endorse $215 million. I think this is a very good contract and solution for both parties at the current lease amount applied to 4.25% discount rate, whatever it ends up being, as long as we can meet our assumptions that the city manager talked about, and the biggest one of which is the unknown, and that's, will a future commission have a need to extract some monies that are invested in this permanent fund? And that's really going to be a permanent fund. It's like the pension fund. My suggestion to the city manager is that we create a board that manages the investments of this pension fund. We do an RFP to find an investment company that will, right now, Element Company's doing it. They do an amazing job for us, but I think this material amount of money coming into the city, we need to do an RFP, and we need to invest those monies along with what we have in the Public Improvement Endowment Fund right now that we're going to need to add to this. But at the end of the day, the city manager and I absolutely endorse the 215 as long as we're able to manage it properly. I think we'll be okay. I don't know if that answered your question though, sir.
Well, not really, Mike. The obvious question that's going to be posed to us, are we going to lose money? Assume that we'll accept the assumptions, and that's fair. Anytime you invest, you accept the risk. But the assumptions you're given, at the end of the lease period, current, does the city lose a lot of money? Do we break even, or do we gain? I think that's a fundamental question that our constituents are going to want to know, and then say they're willing to accept those terms.
That's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't understand what you had originally asked. When we started talking with the hospital administration and board, oh gosh, maybe last September-ish, thereabouts, the thought was, I wonder if we can find a way to prepay the current lease, and what dollar amount could we solve for in the Public Improvement Fund, such that we did not have to ask the citizens to pay more in taxes for the level of services that they're being provided now and through the Public Improvement Fund. And what does that mean? We've talked about it a little bit in the one-on-ones, but it's the $1 million a year that we need to set aside for fire trucks. It's the playgrounds and maintaining buildings and air conditioning and things like that for the general fund, things that would otherwise be in the general fund that you'd have to raise property taxes to cover. And so at the 215, at a 6% average rate of return, at a 1.75% growth rate after 2030 going forward, those numbers run out for 100 years. And at 100 years, you're still not having to dip into property taxes to cover anything in the Public Improvement Fund. So that's the logic you use going into this, sir. So I would tell you, I would tell any citizen that if we meet these assumptions, the citizens will not be impacted at all. And that's how we tried to solve for this, not by extracting any more money from the hospital or requesting it from the hospital as an end result than what we needed in the Public Improvement Fund. And 215 gets you there. And it's a sensitive dollar amount. If we played around even at 213 and 212 to see what's our, and at that amount, you start going negative in the out years. So that's how we backed into the amount that we could say, this is our bottom that we could really
look at the 7 of you and say, if we meet our assumptions, we're not going to have to affect the citizens at all.
Let me, if I can, I'd like to make a couple of comments also to go along with some of that discussion from Mike. And so, Commissioner Selvage and to the other commissioners, in my one-on-one conversations with each of you, just to update you along the way as to where we were, I referred to beyond 2030 as being a maintenance budget. And so what that would mean is until 2030, as we discussed earlier, where we had, large capital projects programmed in, some of those remain and others we had to significantly reduce. And I gave some examples of those. But then beyond 2030, the ability to continue to program in, large capital projects would go away. I mean, it would become a maintenance budget, and it would fund things like Mr. Brossart just pointed out, and that's where the 1.75% growth rate comes in. If we were to experience growth in that and those costs greater than 1.75%, then we would have a shortfall. And so it would be just a maintenance budget beyond 2030. The other thing, Commissioner Selvage, to some of your questions there, a lot of that ties back to what we've talked about with the discount rate. Now, I can tell you, we didn't go into this mathematical, problem that Mike has worked so hard to figure out and has done a fantastic job. But we didn't go into this trying to determine, what is with a market discount rate, and what's owed on the remaining portion of the lease, what would the net present value be? And instead, we went in trying to solve for the continual funding of the PIF. However, it has worked out to where at the end of the day, the 215 million, if you did apply a discount rate to that, we're very close to what the current market would indicate as an acceptable discount rate. So, whether you move that discount rate, up or down, that would then impact the question that you're asking, as to whether or not we would receive more or less over the life of the loan. But anytime you're going to work on a prepayment like this, those are factors that you just have to estimate based on those current market conditions. And so it's worked out to where the number being discussed is what we need to continue the PIF in the manner that we've explained. And it also is I think a good indication of very close to that net present value with I think the only then debate about that being what that actual discount rate would be. But Mike and Jeff Stearns and others, we've talked to lenders that we work with at the city, and we've talked to some rating agencies, and we feel that the math at the very end of this thing also indicates a good net present value with the discount rate that it would equate to.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to commend our team at the city for working so closely with LRH and coming to this agreement, because I think that for our residents in the city of Lakeland, that this is an absolute priority to figure out how we can go forward. Because even if we're talking about the Public Improvement Fund and what that impacts our citizenry, I think we also have to be very cognizant that our nonprofit hospital here provides so much indigent health care. They are such the safety net for our entire area and region that too is a priority for our residents. So coming together and at both sides giving a little bit is really critical, and I think really important to the process. I just want to echo, or not really echo, but say for the public who's listening that this is not a normal situation that municipalities have as a revenue stream. So I think although we're looking as down the road of how we're going to fund the Public Improvement Fund and whether we're going to increase millage or not, this is just not normal. This is something that years and years ago that our commission stepped in because we own the hospital, and they decided to put a lease agreement in and let the medical professionals run the hospital. And then that went on a percentage increase every year, and that's how we got to this 14 million. And then several years ago, we renegotiated the lease and put a cap on it, because our hospital, this is a different kind of tax. So if our residents are going to the hospital and paying for services, or we have indigent healthcare services, this is something that's still going into the city coffers. And that's where we're trying to find a way that we have become reliant on a revenue stream that is just not normal and many other municipalities do not experience this. As it was alluded to earlier, most municipalities may charge $1, they may charge $10. They don't charge $14 and $15 million to the people who are providing healthcare to the community at large. So I think it's really important that, yes, we need to fund that public improvement fund, but at the same time, we don't know what's guaranteed tomorrow. So we might not, we can come to a lease agreement, and if there isn't a hospital in a few years because our certificate of need has been wiped away and we're having other partners come into the community, I think this lease agreement is the best case scenario for both the city and for the hospital, because we're really not guaranteed anything in life. I mean, the pandemic has proven that things can shift on a dime. So I think that we're at a really good agreement. I think that everyone's worked diligently to get here. So I'm, in favor of doing this. I think Mike has done an amazing job to look down the road at how we can fund things for our citizens and our community at large. But I also think that we want to be good and fair partners to our community healthcare system. So I just applaud everyone for all the diligence that they've done. Sean, Danielle, I know you guys have worked really, really hard for months now to come to this agreement, and I appreciate all the work that's been done on behalf of both us, the city, and the hospital.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And let me just echo what I think I heard from my finance director, Mr. Brozart, which I think is important for those that may be listening and for those that may want to question as to, this particular arrangement that we're looking into making become favorable for both of us as a win-win situation. And that is the assumptions that you mentioned, Mr. Brozart, will still, if everything, being as we hope it would be, we're going to still look at having the funding of the dollars available to be able to still do those things we wish to do and not have to possibly have some type of what we call millage increase or property tax increase and in respect of what, what may happen and with the assumptions being the way they are. So I want that to make sure that we heard that. And thank you for sharing that, because I think that's important for the public to hear and understand as well, because that's where a lot of times we get the questions about, the increase and making sure that we can keep, what we call nominal millage rates or lower, property taxing situation. So I'm favorable in the sense of what I'm hearing. But I, again, want to make sure that I heard from other colleagues to have me be able to come to some agreement where I'm thinking in my mind, it looks to be a pretty much win-win situation for the both entities.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, sir. I have several questions. Mike, what is the accrued payment at this point for the lease? If let's assume that they wanted to buy it, just for personal knowledge there.
I'm sorry, the accrued payment, the amount left to pay?
Yes. Well, I mean, let's just see, right now, there's a number right now they've got accrued lease payments, plus the $215, I guess.
I think the question is what credit they would be entitled to against the purchase price based on their payments since 1986.
Correct.
Oh, I don't have that handy, sir. I'd have to research what that was.
Okay, that's all right. Just one, Palmer, option 3. Explain that a little bit better to me, please.
Okay, option 3 would be to sell or lease the hospital to a third party. And that implicates the state statute that I discussed earlier, which states that a sale or lease to a party other than the existing lessee would result in the sale or lease proceeds having to be dedicated to healthcare related expenses and indigent care services. So barring a change in the state law, that state statute that I discussed, a sale or lease to a party other than LRMC at the end of this current lease term would result in the proceeds being restricted.
Okay, so that could be changed. And Sean, I thought we had some verbiage to some kind of effect that if that transpired, we may have an option to do that. Is that a fair statement?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, Commissioner Reed.
I think there was some verbiage at one point that we put in the document that I think the hospital didn't find satisfactory about changing the deal or paying them back or something like that. What was that all about exactly?
I would defer to Palmer on the language in the agreement. That's been an ongoing effort between legal with the hospital and the city. Palmer, do you have any comments on that?
I'm not quite sure what the nature of the question is. I would say that the current lease places an obligation on the city and LRMC to engage in good faith negotiations to try to either do a lease extension or a sale to the hospital prior to invoking the third option. So I don't think we can just unilaterally go to that third option without good faith negotiations with the hospital.
So if we do this deal, is option 3 still available to us?
Not if we do this agreement, no.
Because of the zero number at the end, or $10?
Well, the Ninth Amendment that we're discussing this morning provides for a lease in perpetuity with the hospital subsequent to 2040. So that's what the result would be after 2040 under this Ninth Amendment.
Because I know that Attorney McCausland said at the end of the lease we had the right to charge a different number. If it was like $1,000 or $1 million or 20 million or whatever the number would be. Of course, I understand what Chad has said, and I know what Sarah has said as well. There again, I think most of the hospitals that have been owned by the communities in the past have been mostly on land versus improvements. And I may be wrong to that point, but we've had this hospital a long time, and this is going to be a major financial commitment that we're going to change for our citizens by doing this. Of course, Don, to answer your questions, last year we discounted the payments by $43 million last year. So there is a discount already in place when we changed our lease amount. I think over the term of lease, and I think it's 43 million. Mike, or is it 46? I don't know, but it's a big number regardless. So they've already gotten a discount to some point last year, and so I'm not too much worried about the number. That concerns me more is what's going to happen at 2040, 2041. And then I guess, to address some of our improvements, Sean, we can, is it in the projections that we would sell that building on our fire station and build a new one?
There's options to that. That there's been, I think some past discussion on that building being, repurposed. And there's also the option to put the building on the market for sale. We've not, the commission nor management has made a decision on that, but there have been past discussions with both options.
Okay.
Oops, I'm sorry, Commissioner, do you have any more?
I'm sure I'll have more questions Monday, but this is a big deal. I just want our citizens to be aware of all the different stuff. It kind of came up we've heard a little bit about it, and the numbers have changed and different stuff. And I've had my one-on-one with the hospital, and I had them recently with Sean. And there again, I'm not sure well how our citizens are going to reflect. I wish we could push this back a little bit between you and I to get some response from our citizenry, because this is going to impact the citizens after 2030 forever and ever and ever. Dick, you can't go back. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Selvage.
Thank you, Mayor. I was first approached about this back in 2010 by Elaine Thompson and Jack Harrell, and I've always supported the moral argument that Sarah brought up. We should somehow get out of this lease because we shouldn't be charging a not-for-profit hospital millions of dollars for our improvement fund. And I voted for the renegotiation of the lease a few years ago. And so I am supportive of making this. To Tiger's point, this is a profound decision. But I think Tiger, just now a few months, we have been working on this now for a decade. And I think if we can convince our people, citizens, that this is a good deal, it's the right thing to do, and we are going to preserve the capital improvement fund. But make no mistake, folks, Mike and Sean done a great job with Danielle, but we have to explain to our citizens, hey, this is not only is it the right thing to do, it's a good thing. We have benefited greatly from two dividends for decades, the utility dividend and the hospital lease dividend. And we're about to lose that. So I'm just saying we need to be prepared to explain it in pretty straightforward terms. One, this is the right thing to do. And two, it's a good business deal. And I think I'm there. I think we are there. And I disagree respectfully with my good buddy Tiger. I think it's time to move on. Thank you.
Other Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Selvage, for mentioning your initial conversations in 2010. I think that's a good reminder. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of late to the game in the discussion because this has been going on for many years. And I just wanted to reiterate that the option that's before us of the prepayment, compared to the other three that Palmer outlined at the end of the lease, those three, there's tremendous uncertainty with all three of those. And so for this, yes, there's some assumptions that are built into the market and the rate of return, but it brings certainty where we don't have it in those other three options. I would not feel comfortable in hanging our hat on option three of selling or leasing to a third party and trying to change the law. That's a huge effort. And a legal opinion of the former city attorney. I just think all of that is, again, it's murky, it's uncertain. And so this brings certainty, clarity, and we know what we have. And as Commissioner Selvage said, I think it's a great deal for the city, a great deal for our residents and for our hospital.
Mr. Brose, our finance director.
Yes, thank you. This is to answer Commissioner Reed's question. The amount that the city of Lakeland has collected since the lease started through 2020 was $271,452,000. Okay, we're collecting another $14,378,000 this year, and then what was due was an additional $334,621,000. So to Commissioner McLeod's point, getting $215 now and being able to invest it, it secures as best we can the future of the citizens' quality of life as a result of the Public Improvement Fund. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Reed.
And if I can just add to that one other comment, we have in fact renegotiated the lease twice now, and there is no certainty in the hospital not having the need for us to do that again in the future. What this eliminates is that vulnerability. So we are kind of counting on something we can't necessarily count on in the first place. Anytime you can move both parties to a spot where they can agree, recognizing I'm paying more than I think I should pay, we're figuring out ways we can sacrifice, is probably a pretty good spot to land. And I think there's been a masterful job on both boards' parts. Ours is staff getting it ready for us as a commission, and the board of directors of the hospital reviewing it and determining that this is something that they can live with. And so I would concur that I think there's been some wonderful work done in the background on this. Right, this isn't the vote, so this is the commission, the agenda study, but I do think that topic is very, very important to make sure that we get anything in advance that we want to know by Monday in place. Is there any other information that you'd want to know prior to Monday, or any comments you want to make at this time on this topic? Commissioner Selvidge.
I would like to ask either Danielle or Sean to give us the implications. You don't have to do it now, but before Monday, what are the implications of the state's decision to revoke the CON status? And in my mind, that is an event that really triggered a lot of the challenges that this community hospital faces in the future. And I would just like to know the facts of what did the CON elimination do to the hospital now and in the future. Thank you.
Sure, and I would be glad to speak to that briefly if you'd like. So when the state repealed the certificate of need for acute care hospitals, it essentially opened up for competition to move into our market. So while, I think we can, debate the impacts of competition and the pros and cons of that, one of the significant risks to us as a safety net, essential hospital in this community, going back to my previous comments, we feel that part of our mission is to provide all healthcare services here locally, regardless of the individual financial impact of that particular service line. I think what we can anticipate with certificate of need going away is that when competitors come into the market, they're more likely going to focus on those highly profitable service lines and direct those to a different facility and leave us providing those services that are not profitable, which would be a further financial burden upon us. But again, we remain steadfast in our mission and what we look to provide, which is what this community needs right now. But we do anticipate with increased competition that there could be the erosion of our margin, particularly for those services that would be more easily done at a small hospital. A hospital as large as ours, 6th largest in Florida, over 860 beds. We're a level 2 trauma center. All of the support services that we need to have to be able to maintain those designations are just costly. So again, you can see where someone that could come in and just focus on something like orthopedics or cardiovascular services, those would be things that would be potentially at risk when you look at our financial performance.
Thank you, Danielle.
And I think that's an excellent point, Commissioner Selvidge, so thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments or questions, amplifications? Looking at you, Commissioner Madden, you almost look like you have something on your face. Go ahead.
Well, everyone has taken my talking points, so I don't have a lot to share that would not be redundant. But I do just want to take a moment to thank the team at LRH and their board, and also Mike Brozart and our team. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, when I had a lot of fear and trepidation about that CON being removed and what that would bring and the erosion of the margins at the hospital that Danielle just talked about, it made me reticent to make decisions about capital improvements in our city. I already felt like that revenue stream was in jeopardy. And I know that I've been, constant a voice in our strategic planning and in our budget that, to me, it was not certain, even though it was certain because the lease said it was certain. The things that the economic climate, what the healthcare has gone through this past year with COVID, not knowing what we don't know, to be able to take advantage of the low interest rates right now and to get to a win-win from both the city side. You know, before I used to say, this is like trying to say what's more important, firefighters and police or nurses and doctors. I mean, certainly all of these things are what we need to have a vibrant city that has great quality of life. So it is difficult, you know, to make some adjustments and to think about potential cuts, you know, that might be in store in the future, but at least it gives us some certainty that I didn't feel that we had, you know, prior to this agreement. And I would have thought it would be a miracle, honestly, to get to a point where we felt like we could actually have some kind of a win-win for both the city and the hospital. And so I am very grateful for everyone who has put the long hours in to make this a reality today. And I will be voting in favor on Monday.
Commissioner Reed. Thank you, Commissioner Mann.
Thank you there again, Bill. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have more questions Monday. I don't know what they are yet, but just for you asked if anybody has any questions, but I do, but I don't know what they are yet. I'm going to have to think about it.
All right, no problem, sir. Thank you very much. All right, we appreciate the LRH team joining us, and I appreciate being able to move this up in the agenda study a little bit so we can get that discussion done and that team can get back to work. All right, we will move back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We will move as a commission back to then the request to appear from the general public. We are going to be able to hear from Doris Moore Bailey regarding Juneteenth, and then Paige Conister is going to bring a awareness kind of presentation for us on a biking opportunity, and that they'll present at that time. That's not a request for action. They're going to be talking about a concept that they could bring, and then they highlight the ordinance that would need to be considered and that LPD would talk about. So for us, it's just an exposure to, and then we can respond later after their presentation. We'll have an equalization hearing. Is there anything unique on that? City Attorney Davis?
No, it appears to be routine, same names and places.
And that I know must frustrate you deeply, sir. Then we have public hearings, and so let's take that public hearing to A1.
All right, this A1 is once again the ordinance amending the Lakeland Retiree Healthcare Reimbursement Plan. It will allow funds to be withdrawn pre-tax from employees' paychecks that can then be used when those employees retire to reimburse them when they pay for healthcare expenses in retirement, and it's tax-free. It's pre-tax from your paycheck, and then it's tax-free when you withdraw from the account to pay for your healthcare expenses. And I think the other component of this is simply the reason why we're doing this now is that we just switched administrators for our deferred comp plan to Voya. And Voya will be the administrator of this retiree healthcare plan as well. So that makes sense. Same investment options and administrators.
Any questions by commissioners? All right, item 2, B1.
B1 is something that we do every year in order to maintain our certification for comp plan amendments, and Teresa will explain that.
Good morning. As City Attorney Davis stated, this is an annual report that is required in order for the City of Lakeland to maintain its designation as a certified community under the state of Florida's local comprehensive planning certification program. We are one of a handful of communities that have this designation, and essentially it means that when we are processing comprehensive plan map amendments, that there is less state and regional oversight of that amendment process. In order to maintain the certification, there are certain measurements that have been established with the original agreement, and annually we report on how we are meeting those measurements. And we also report on any prior year's annexations and future land use map amendment changes. So with the current year, we did have a number of future land use map amendments, and we also did have an annexation with the Orlando Health property down south of the Parkway. So that property that was annexed will now be incorporated into that certification area within which we have this expedited process. This agenda item is actually related to an agenda item later down on the agenda, and that is to amend our agreement with the state to reflect this new certification area. And at Monday's meeting, this is a public hearing to take comment on the certification report before we transmit it up to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity.
Questions by commissioners. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a question, but I'd like to just, make a comment. As Ms. Teresa said, we're one of probably, I think, 10, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the state that are permitted to do things and share things go through processes without having to get the state's approval when it comes to having this kind of certification. So I know we might have heard it, before, but I like to commend our staff and commend our city for what we have and continue to have as being, I guess, again, probably, I think it was a 10, if I'm not mistaken. I've heard number 10 has always been the number I've heard. Cities throughout the state that has this particular certification at best. So I think it's a very good thing.
And as an example, this is what allowed the VA site to move more quickly through the process with their comprehensive plan amendment and the PUD changes.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Teresa, it's good to have you here. There again, I think we are very fortunate that we do have this capability. It streamlines our process much easier than a lot of communities do. There again, I'd like to highlight at our strategic planning, we need to, in order to make ourselves a little bit above everybody else, I'd like for us to focus a little bit more on our traffic areas in the future. Be a bit more stringent, and we need to maybe say no to some people when we think it's going to stifle our. If it's not a level F, we still don't have to say yes. And of course, I'd like to see if we've talked a little bit. I'd like to do some stuff on some parking in reference to apartments and stuff like that, but that's irrelevant. But the traffic component is going to be tremendous. And while I'm talking a little bit on traffic, one of the county commissioners got with me, and I guess they're going to initiate a 1% sales tax, maybe coming up. I don't think they've talked to you, and we're about $1.2 billion in road needs throughout the county. And if we can get a 1 cent sales tax on the gasoline tax, and sunset it in 10 years, we could bond that, and we can get a lot of our projects done right now. That'll give us about $700,000 worth of road work in the city of Lakeland. So again, that may be something we may need to endorse in the near future. But just keep in mind when we're doing these, when developers come to us and we're looking at roads, don't be afraid to say no.
All right, thank you for that pitch, sir. Any other comments from commissioners? All right. Teresa, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up on this at all?
Nothing else to add. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Barnby, I see you're present. Do you have anything you're wanting to add?
I would just add, and I appreciate Commissioner Reed's comments about the traffic issues. I would just say that, and this, is probably, a much bigger discussion that we would need to have with our partners in Tallahassee, is that, there have been a number of recent changes to legislation that really restrict, frankly, how or our ability to say outright no to development activity, depending on their impacts to the road system. And so that's why, you've seen with some other recent projects where we've had either a zoning action or an annexation land use action where we have really been able to, I think, have a more extensive set of mitigation requirements for new development that, are of course focused on moving people, and complement our system, and I'll just use Orlando Health as an example. But there are others where if you do have an existing land use or zoning entitlement on property, we're restricted to focus our mitigation on the actual project's impacts and not on existing failures. And so that's where anything that we can do to increase our revenue to address those existing failures is going to be key. And I think that, it's certainly a much bigger picture discussion, but the more assistance and help we can have from our legislative delegation in Tallahassee to give us the flexibility to generate locally approved or locally adopted revenue sources and the ability to have more of a say in development approvals if there is in fact an existing failure on the transportation system, I think really does help address at least our local concerns and what we're hearing from our local residents and constituents about striking a good balance. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that out there, that we certainly agreed that there are a number of areas where traffic is a major issue, but the ability to flat out say no to development is very severely restricted by recent legislation that's come at the state level.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And Chuck, I appreciate that. And I understand our situation. There again, I know like in South Hillsborough County, they just put a moratorium on development. And I don't know how they do that. And of course, we don't have an area per se that we want to stifle growth, but down in Ruskin and their south, they just said, they're just turning down. They said, you don't even bring application to us. We're not going to accept anything.
And that is.
Any other comments by commissioners? All right, let's go on to then the city manager's report. Section, not report. I'm sorry, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 5 items for presentation this morning and again on Monday. The first item being a recommendation regarding an award of an RFQ to Amherst Consulting Company and Atkins North America for engineering contracts for the reconstructions of Taxiway P and Taxiway E at Lakeland International Airport. The Federal Aviation Administration requires that the airport file an application for federal assistance for projects to be considered by the FAA for funding within the current fiscal year. To complete an application, the design through bidding needs to be completed and construction bids obtained. The airport intends to submit applications for the reconstruction of the taxiways mentioned. The airport advertised for the architectural and engineering professional services for both taxiway projects under RFQ number 1006 in December 2020, with 5 firms responding to the request. The selection committee met on January 21st to rank the firms to provide the design and construction administration for each of these 2 projects. Amherst Consulting Company and Atkins North America were ranked as the top firms. Based on the rankings, the airport awarded the design for the reconstructions of Taxiway E, Taxiway Echo, to Amherst Consulting Company, and the design for the reconstruction of Taxiway P, that would be Taxiway Papa, to Atkins North America. The FAA requires that an independent fee estimate be prepared by a third-party engineering firm and that the negotiated fee be within 10% of the independent fee estimate. The airport engaged Cutchins and Grow out of Tampa to prepare the fee estimate for both of the projects. The proposed contracts were reviewed and negotiated by airport staff, and both proposed contracts with Amherst and Atkins are within the acceptable 10% range. So staff will be making recommendations for approvals of the award of the RFQ and the related contracts. That completes my presentation on this item. We'll stand for any questions, and our airport director has joined us as well.
Any questions on this? All right, let's go to the next item.
Thank you. The next item is a recommendation regarding a task authorization with Environmental Science Associates for a Lake Bonnie Wetland Water Quality Improvement Study. The Lakes and Stormwater Division solicited a scope of services from Environmental Science Associates to assist the city in complying with its municipal separate stormwater sewer system, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, permit requirements pertaining to the total maximum daily load or TMDL nutrient load reduction requirements for Lake Bonnie. The Lake Bonnie TMDL identified both external and in-lake processes as potential factors to implement water quality restoration projects to achieve the required load reductions. This work effort proposes to elevate water quality improvements through nutrient reduction via wetland restoration and attenuation processes. The task authorization summarizes the targeted plan developed by Environmental Science Associates to evaluate the existing wetland on the west side of Lake Bonnie for potential water quality improvement through the nutrient load reductions. Funding for the Lake Bonnie Wetland Water Quality Improvement Study is provided in the FY21 Stormwater Utility CIP, and staff will be making recommendations for approval. And I believe Lori Smith has joined us, so that completes presentation. We'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions on that item? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. And I was looking at that one and the next one, and I was just curious, Lori, do we use different firms for different lakes, or do we have, I mean, is that common? What's the advantage of that?
So for continuity, we like to use the same consultant that started the assessment. So as you see, the next one is with Wood. Wood has done a lot of the assessment work on our lakes. So they have all the records. They have the same staff that have been working on the lakes since the beginning that we started the assessment work. But environmental sciences, they are more wetland scientists. So that's their specialty. Where kind of in-lake restoration projects are the specialty of Wood, and stormwater treatment projects are the specialty of Wood. So I like to use the firm that has the expertise for specific projects. But I have multiple firms on a CCNA that I choose from.
Thank you. That's helpful. Because on the surface,
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Lori, I have two questions. How big is Lake Bonnie, and do we have a public boat ramp there? I don't know where it is.
There is a public boat ramp, and it's off of Main Street, in between East Lake Bonnie Drive and Lake Bonnie Drive, just past Longfellow.
How big is it?
See, now you're going to make me look that up. It's 249 acres, all told.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reed, I'm surprised you didn't know that boat ramp was there. You do now? Okay, and I saw another commissioner hand.
That was me, Mr. Mayor, but she's over to answer my question. Thank you, Ms. Laura.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next item then, because it kind of complements and we may have already touched on it.
Thank you, Mayor. The next similar item is regarding a recommendation for a task authorization with Wood Environmental and Infrastructure Solutions for Crystal Lake Water Quality Improvement Study. The City of Lakeland has been awarded a reimbursable 50% matching cooperative funding initiative grant from the Southwest Florida Water Management District for the Crystal Lake Water Quality Improvement Study. The proposed project consists of a feasibility study to evaluate nutrient reduction sediment treatment options to improve water quality in Crystal Lake. The lake does not meet current water quality standards and has a Florida Department of Environmental Protection mandated nutrient reduction plan. The results of the feasibility study will be used to implement the full-scale sediment restoration project to meet the water quality standards. To assist in the task included, a not to exceed fee of $239,772 has been negotiated under the city's continuing municipal engineering agreement with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. Funding for this project is provided in the FY21 Stormwater CIP budget. It should also be noted that Polk County Parks and Natural Resources has agreed to continue to co-fund water quality assessment, monitoring, and restoration projects at 33%, or in this case, $46,158 of the cost incurred via reimbursement to the City of Lakeland upon completion of this project. It is also expected that the Southwest Florida Water Management District will continue its 50% cooperative funding of the project through the restoration phase that will be implemented based upon the recommendations of this study. And so staff will be recommending approval of the task authorization. That completes presentation. Again, Lori is on the call if there are any questions.
No questions. Let's continue on, and thank you, Lori, for joining us, and Ryan as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry I didn't hear that. Are we ready to move to the next item?
Yes, sir, I apologize. Let's go on to the next point. Thank you, Lori, for joining us.
Thank you. The next item is a recommendation regarding the award of a bid number 0323 to Cobb Site Development, a construction agreement for the Main Street Pathways Project and task authorization with Kissinger, Campo, and Associates for construction, engineering, and inspection services. The Main Street Pathways project includes the construction of a 10-foot wide multi-use asphalt trail along the south side of East Main Street between Interlochen Parkway and Longfellow Boulevard. It also has improvements to the traffic signal at the intersection of East Main Street and Longfellow Boulevard, consisting of new signal poles and mast arms to eliminate the span wire traffic signal, as well as also the installation of pedestrian indicators and installation of ADA deployment and bench pads at each of the transit stops within that corridor. Following a prior unsuccessful advertisement of the project, proposals were again solicited through the city's purchasing division on October 19th and again on December 16th. Two proposed bids were received. Of the two bids, Larson's Grading and Paving was deemed unresponsive due to the lack of the required bid bond and other required information. Therefore, Cobb Site Development was determined to be the lowest responsive bidder, and subsequently a notice of intent to award was issued by the city's purchasing on February 4th, 2021 to Cobb Site Development. Funding in the amount of $773,061 will be reimbursable through a local agency program agreement between the FDOT and the City of Lakeland. The City of Lakeland will provide the shortfall amount of $28,943.48 from the Transportation Fund. There will be two phases of work on this project. Phase one work will be 140 calendar days and will include lead time to procure traffic signal equipment. Phase two work will be 130 calendar days and will include the construction of the multi-use path, traffic signal work, and all other construction as called for in the contract plans. Additionally, the city solicited a proposal from Kissinger, Campo, and Associates, which is one of the city's continuing professional service contract vendors for construction and engineering inspection services for the Main Street Parkway construction project. Funding for these are and city staff oversight in the amount of $82,050 will be reimbursable through a local agency program agreement between the FDOT and the City of Lakeland. And so staff will be recommending approval. That completes presentation at this time.
Any questions for City Manager Council, Mr. Lazenby? All right, I see none, so let's thank you for joining us, Ryan, and then go to E.
Item E is a recommendation regarding life extension clinics for firefighter annual physicals. Firefighter annual physicals were renegotiated in the most recent firefighter collective bargaining agreement. Firefighter physicals were previously performed in our Health Stat employee clinic. Purchasing has approved this request as a sole source vendor. The ratified collective bargaining agreement includes that annual physicals shall be conducted through Lifescan wellness centers. Life Extension clinics doing business as Lifescan wellness centers is located in Tampa, Florida, shall provide annually at a maximum of $400 per physical. The fire department has 171 sworn firefighters, where a maximum of $400 per physical equals the total of $68,400 at this time annually. Firefighter physicals are an important element in the annual occupational evaluation to assist risk management and the fire department with early detection and the prevention of occupational diseases. The guidelines that are followed for firefighter physicals are within the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association Comprehensive Occupational Medical Program for fire departments. A post-employment offer for physicals is initially performed as a baseline medical evaluation for our occupational use. And as the career of the firefighter progresses, the annual physical may be compared to the baseline to identify any relevant changes in physical conditioning. Lifescan Wellness Program has an integrated medical approach to firefighter exams that combines an annual physical with life-saving and early detection testing for major diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and aneurysms before they reach a catastrophic level. It is exclusively designed to meet the unique needs of public safety departments, offering an annual occupational health and wellness and fitness evaluation that focuses on those early detection and prevention measures. Lifescan Wellness Programs provides on-site same-day examinations at a City of Lakeland location, which reduces the time it takes to remain on duty while receiving the evaluation. Each Lifescan exam has the added benefit of ultrasound imaging assessment of the internal organs and cardiovascular systems to assist with early detection to reduce workers' compensation costs and health care costs before they reach those catastrophic levels. Staff will be recommending approval of the Lifescan Wellness Center contract. That completes presentation.
Mrs. Diaz, can you report on the cost effectiveness of this?
Well, Mayor?
Just can you comment on the cost effectiveness of this?
The cost effectiveness, I think the prevention is probably the biggest piece. The comprehensive exam that's provided through the scans and their wellness evaluation is a big piece of future prevention in catching, early stage diseases and medical conditions.
Mr. Mayor, one comment on that, if I may as well. The part of the cost for this is offset by the previous funding that we had budgeted to provide physicals through our on-site wellness clinics.
Commissioner Selich.
Sir, the staff has endorsed this. The union has ratified it. Is it appropriate to put this on consent?
It's fine with me.
Then I propose that we move this to the consent agenda.
I think everybody's in sync, so let's do that. All right. Any other questions on this item then? All right, let's go back to City Attorney. Ordinances first reading, item number A1.
Thank you. We have several ordinances for first reading. Item A1 is a request for a conditional use to allow 4 single-family attached dwellings at 24 Lake Hollingsworth Drive. And Teresa's pulling that up, and we'll orient you to where that is and what's involved.
All right, this is the subject property. It's located at the corner of Mississippi Avenue and Lake Hollingsworth Drive. It consists of 2 former single-family lots for a total of approximately 0.32 acres. The proposal is to develop 4 townhomes, or what we call single-family attached units, on the subject property. These are just some images showing the current condition. You can see the Florida Southern College Christofferson Humanities Building off to the right. This is looking up Mississippi, across back west over the site. Again, up Mississippi. This is an alley that runs along the western portion of the property. And here is the proposed layout. So access to the units would be via the alley, and then an east-west driveway that would connect from the alley back over to Mississippi Avenue. These are the building elevations. Because this is located within the Lake Morton Historic District, it was subject to design review by the Historic Preservation Board's Design Review Committee. They approved both the demolition of the single-family structure that previously existed on the site and the elevations and overall massing of the proposed units. The staff recommended conditions for this provide for an increased setback along Mississippi Avenue and also along the alley over to the west. This was done in order to mitigate for the visual impacts of the proposed development, given that it is of a significant height, larger than what is the typical single to 2-story buildings in the surrounding area, but not unlike the Christofferson Humanities Building over to the east. We did have quite a few surrounding property owners come out and speak to this, but we believe that with the architectural treatments that were approved by the HPB and the increased setbacks, that this is approvable with the conditions that are recommended by staff.
Any questions by commissioners? All right, thank you for presentation on that. That then takes us to the next item.
Teresa?
The next item is a change in zoning from single family to planned unit development, again for a townhouse community. This one located on 4.5 acres off Druid Street and East Gilmore Avenue. This is the subject property, and off to the right you can see what is a condominium development. That's the Lakeland Harbor Apartments. For context, these are some of the surrounding properties. So you can see it's surrounded by single family primarily, but again, that multifamily condominium to the east. And this is the proposed site plan, which shows a collection of townhomes arranged along a block street pattern. This was a layout that staff worked quite a bit with the developer on after a prior site plan had been proposed before the Planning and Zoning Board. We really wanted to increase the amount of civic open space in this, provide a more regular block structure, to have it be more typical of the lot arrangement that you would see in an older neighborhood. In this particular case, stormwater runoff was a concern of the Lakeland Harbor Apartments. There's a retaining wall that exists along the eastern boundary of the subject property, and there's some current stormwater issues in the area. But as with all developments, this will be subject to city and SWIFT-MUD permitting, and there cannot be any increase in runoff as a result of this project. The applicant also did purchase some additional property to the south in order to enlarge their stormwater pond. And because of that, they wanted the ability to do the 40 units to be able to offset the cost of the purchase of that land.
Questions by commissioners? Thank you. Next item.
Oh, sorry, here's a rendering of that if you're seeing it. Moving on to the next one, 4806 Hamilton Road. This is a modification to the planned unit development zoning for the Morgan Creek development, which was approved originally back in 2004. Within the Morgan Creek PUD, there is this subject parcel, which never was given any specific unit count for residential purposes, but it was anticipated that it would be developed for residential uses given its future land use designation and a condition within the PUD that said at some future time when access could be provided to the site that it would have to come back through the planning and zoning review process and city commission approval to adopt that site plan. So what's being proposed on the subject site is 56 units. Access would be provided through a parcel that's located within the county up here to the north and on the far left of the subject property. Here's the existing conditions along Medela. This is at the corner of Medela and Hamilton off on the northeast corner. And here's the proposed site plan showing the 56 units that would be located within the city, and then the additional 29 units that would be located within the county. And this parcel would, again, provide access down to the city parcel. The county portion of this development has received approval through Polk County. I would note, however, that there is some pending litigation that has been submitted by surrounding property owners challenging the county's decision to approve that land use. And we are aware of that, we're monitoring it, but in any event, the city portion of this will be approved contingent upon access being provided through that county property. This is one request that you've heard quite a bit from the surrounding property owners, primarily about the community character out there. And with regard to that, what we would say is that this site is heavily buffered. The overall density of the development is consistent with the underlying future land use designation, which is residential low. The other primary concern dealt with, again, stormwater and flooding. Those are historical concerns in this area, so they are pre-existing this development. This development, again, will have to comply with all city and SWIFMUD permitting requirements. And the applicant did also have their engineer design this project so that it would be able to accommodate a 100-year, 24-hour storm event, which is in excess of what would otherwise be required through permitting. So again, with the conditions of approval, we do recommend this for approval.
Any questions or comments on this, Commissioner Reed?
Teresa, the 10-acre site, will we have any control of it if it gets zoned? It's already zoned, but I guess there's litigation. Will they have to come and annex with that?
Eventually, they will have to annex because they are going to be connecting to city utilities, wastewater, and as part of that connection, they will have to enter into a voluntary annexation agreement. So at some point in the future, we will annex. The other important thing to note about the city portion of this is that, as with the existing planned unit development, we are requiring that they enter into an abrogation agreement to recognize that they are in proximity to the airport.
Okay, I don't have too much problem with this. Originally, I had put this big thing together with different people from Landstar out of Canada years ago, and but the 10-acre parcel again is to protect Medela Road from the airport. And of course, as we indicate, I've seen literature that they put out there on the back page. You hardly can read that they don't have to let everybody know about the airport and the noise and stuff that's going to be forthcoming. I just want to make sure that, again, I am not in favor of the zoning on this particular. I don't know if you can see me. I'm moving my cursor up and down the 10-acre block. And ironically, the developer contacted me. We don't have water and sewer on this coming in that 10-acre site now, do we?
There is currently not a connection to this site, but it is available in the area, and they will have to connect to those city utilities.
How far away is it from this site?
The water, I believe this is the area that you've heard in the past them talk about.
County Line Road, maybe?
I see County Line, but then I believe it comes down off Medela.
And then the sewer? Same spot?
Same spot, yes.
So they'll be responsible for bringing that down. Will they get any impact fee credits if they did that?
No, they will not.
So it's going to be a tremendous expense to them coming down from the west County Line Road to this particular site, isn't it?
Right, the extension to their property is their responsibility.
If we approve this, will that automatically give them the rights basically to do something on this 10-acre parcel right on the from Medela Road?
The 10 acres would not give them any rights to develop since it's currently in the county. That would be subject to the county approval.
So we can deny that if we wish.
The 10-acre portion, currently no, because they are proceeding with development with that remaining in the county.
So they're not going to annex until, so we won't have any control of that 10-acre parcel until they've already put roads and water and sewer in. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Madden, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Teresa. This is an area that I've been really concerned about. I think it's always tricky when the city and county streets, converge and we have different codes and requirements. And, just because the city portion, promises that they're going to do a 100-year storm event, mitigation of flooding and stormwater runoff, does that protect the neighboring areas from flooding? Because I've received numerous pictures from neighbors, and that area floods a tremendous amount, even up into the houses of some of those houses already. And, it's their understanding that it's been the development out there that has not been maybe developed appropriately with that English Creek that has caused over the last decade, an increase in the flooding in that area. So I'm reticent to, approve this when I'm not sure how we'll work in tandem with the county and with the annexation and with the other landowners who will still remain in the county. Is it just too bad for them, that their property won't be improved and have stormwater runoff that protects them for the 100-year flood? Because of the building all around them. All of this gives me great pause.
With this particular project, this will not result in any increase in flooding. However, it's not going to eliminate those pre-existing conditions. And that is something that, again, it's a concern we've heard about for some time now. As this application came through the Planning and Zoning Board process, and we were seeing the comments about flooding, we realized that it's something that, even though it may be occurring in the county, that we had to address with the county staff and with city staff. So we had some conversations with the county. Our own Public Works Department took a look at this, and I believe that you received a memo in that regard outlining what the conditions are out there and some measures that have been put in place, or some projects that are occurring relative to flooding in the area, and particularly in the city portion as it comes from the north up towards Drainfield. So that is something that we're working on to try and look at ways that we can address those pre-existing conditions, but this project in and of itself won't make those conditions any worse.
Thank you, Commissioner Madden and Teresa. Are there other questions? The mayor stepped out for just a second. Yes, Commissioner Reed.
Is Gene still on the available?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. We're going to be moving another runway further to the south. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And that traffic's going to come out and swing to, most of it comes out and turns to the south?
Well, it depends on, there is traffic that turns to the south. So when you look at our fleet mix, as far as our aircraft that are using our facility today and what we're going to see in the future, it's very unique. So what I would tell you is, for our flight schools, for example, on the smaller single engine, twin engine aircraft, general aviation aircraft, those aircraft, which are probably currently turning over this area, will continue to do that. The larger aircraft, whether it's Amazon or it's future commercial service, it's NOAA and things like that, those aircraft won't be making a southbound turn most likely over this area. I don't know if I can share my screen or not, if I'm able to do that.
You're all unshare, and then Kevin will have to make you presenter.
But there will be significant more noise to the south as that runway is moved further to the south from the bigger airplanes or jets. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it will shift noise to the south, but it will shift noise that's otherwise contained. The sensitive noise or the noise areas will be still maintained in our boundaries. But as aircraft are arriving or departing, they will have noise and they will see aircraft, but the bigger aircraft will not be flying directly over the top of them.
Right, okay.
I'm trying to share here. I don't know.
You don't see it yet.
Can you see this?
Yes, we've got it. Good.
Yeah, so when you specifically look at this area, what we're referencing right now, this is the area inside the city limits, and this is the area, this 10 acres that's in the county. And you can see when we depart 27, generally if they're going northbound, the aircraft are going to Wilmington or they're going to JFK, they're making this turn. It's not exactly obviously on this track, but this is the average of the track when they're turning to go northbound. So this is County Line Road. This is Amazon's larger facility up here. And obviously there's a tremendous amount of warehouse development that's occurred up in this area. But when the aircraft goes southbound, they're generally heading out to the west, whether they're going back out to Phoenix or Ontario or Sacramento. And when they depart in this direction, this is generally their departure path. Granted, it can be on either side. This isn't the exact path, but this is what you would see. So again, this is the county area and this is the future development. So these aircraft, I have seen some turn south like this, but they're getting out over County Line Road. So even when we talk about Southwest Lakeland in the future and all this development that's now occurring down here, generally the paths are not over this area. There still will be impact, but it's not significant as far as how the FAA measures noise because the aircraft aren't flying directly over this area.
Gene, got to do a line where that new runway will come to the south, right about where your cursor is now?
Yeah, so here is, if you can see it right here, this is the Warbird ramp. Right. And so the southern edge of the new runway would be on just north of the Warbird ramp. So it'd be in this area right here. And so then the approach end of the runway, or the threshold, would be right here in this area. So these tracks it'd still be the same track. So it does take it closer, obviously, to this location here, but this runway also will be shorter. It'll only be 7,400 feet. So they will still, unless we're doing maintenance or something, generally they're still going to be using the big runway, which is currently 927 on the north side. Most likely this runway will, for the larger aircraft, would be used just for landing.
Okay.
They're entirely parallel runways, and so it's really, Gene, are they about, what's the distance between the two on the plan?
Oh, brother. I want to say it's about 1,000 feet, or between 800 and 1,000 feet between the two.
Okay, so, but the point being that it's pretty negligible. The flight patterns would be the same.
That's correct. And again, the departure aircraft will still be on the big runway, again, unless we're doing maintenance on the big runway. We have to shift it to the south for whatever period of time that would be.
Any other questions?
I would just say that it's important that all this be presented at the public hearing on this in a couple of weeks, so that's all on the record.
Very good. So we'll redo that then. If there are no other questions, let's go on to the next item.
All right, I think that's it for the zoning. The next item is an amendment to our nuisance abatement board ordinance. Jared in our office has been working with the LPD and the police chief on this, and he's going to describe what this is about.
Thank you, Palmer, Mayor and Commissioners. This is, we have a nuisance abatement board in the city of Lakeland that is created pursuant to a state statute. It's 893.138. And that statute declares that certain types of criminal activity can be declared a public nuisance, and it creates an administrative process that gives the city certain authorities to abate that activity. And it's been an effective tool for the Lakeland Police Department. in their crime fighting effort. And since the statute was recently amended, they've added additional types of criminal conduct that could be considered a public nuisance, particularly violent crimes and reoccurring violent crimes, and then other crimes involving pain management clinics. So in the January meeting, the Lakeland Police Department presented these additional amendments to the statute to the Nuisance Abatement Board, and the Nuisance Abatement Board unanimously approved, recommending that the City Commission adopt this additional criteria. So just some examples of what is going to be added to the criteria. It would be repeated occurrences of murder, felony murder, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon without the intent to kill, and then dealing in stolen property and violations of the Florida Drug and Cosmetic Act, and then repeated burglary, theft, or robbery occurring at a pain management clinic. The additional amendments to the statute also include increasing the potential fine amount up to $15,000. Previously, under our current code, the fine amount is capped at $7,500. So that would be expanded, and then also the statute now provides certain defenses to property owners if the tenant is actually responsible for the nuisance activity, and the landlord takes prompt action to remedy the nuisance once notified that it's occurring. I believe Chief Garcia is on the line if anyone has any questions for the Lakeland Police Department regarding this, but we are recommending that the commission adopt the ordinance and make these amendments to the code.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Simpson, and of course, Chief Garcia. I'm in favor of course, what change that you're bringing to us for approval. My question, though, is when we had the report that was given at the end of the calendar year, I think it was back in November, for our gang task force, and there was a 2020 gang activity report given to the gang task force team at that time. The Nuisance Abatement Board had not seen any activity. I think the time last seen something was back, I think around September of last year, if I'm not mistaken. Has there been any other activity since that time? I heard you just mention the board met last month in January, but have we seen any activity as far as the Nuisance Abatement Board at all since that, I guess that September time back last year?
No, we have not. The board met in January just to get an update on from LPD, and then also to discuss this item. But the last case that was brought was the one that you're referring to in September. That was actually initiated, I believe, in March of last year, and then it was heard again. We had some litigation relating to that case that I handled after we resolved the litigation, and we convened the board to readdress the matter in I believe it was September. Chief Garcia can speak to whether or not he anticipates future cases to be brought this year.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, sir. To answer your question, we have a few different cases that we're currently working that may end that way. A lot of times these cases end with the landlord taking the appropriate action and evicting the tenant where it doesn't need to go to an abatement board process. And that has been the case most recently, and the reason we haven't brought any cases to the abatement board itself. But we are working a number of locations that will help improve the quality of life in some of our neighborhoods, and that would be our last resort to go to the abatement board if we don't gain cooperation through the landlords and the property owners.
If I may ask, is it safe to say then, Chief, and I know we've had conversations over the years, but about situations such as these, am I safe to say again that we're seeing a decrease then in some of the nuisance abatement situations that we have had seen some years back with being more fluid than now? Would you say that?
It would be fair to say we've received good cooperation from the property owners, and therefore don't have the need to take that further action of going to the abatement board. So we're solving some of these problems in the more infant stage, and it's not getting protracted out to the point that it's going to a nuisance abatement board.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good question, good news. Why are pain clinics isolated as a location?
Well, those amendments were made to the statute a few years ago. There was an issue across the state with pain management clinics, as many folks were seeing some external effects happening there. You can see that the types of crimes that are listed under the specific to the pain management clinic are the robbery and theft type things. Those so those types of crimes would not create or be considered a nuisance unless it occurred at a pain management clinic. And I believe the intent was to address some of these what people like to refer to as pill mills. Right. It was just a tool that the legislature tried to give the local government to address the pill mill problem.
All right, and then Chief Garcia, I noticed there aren't any changes in noise levels and the decibel complaints that people have from time to time. What do you think what we have in place is adequate? And what is the decibel limit? Because that comes up from time to time for allowable, unarrestable noise, I guess.
Yes, sir. I do believe we have what we need in place to address that without confirming the statute. I believe it's 100 feet from a vehicle or a location that the sound can emit from. But we're not having a large amount of issues with getting compliance with that. The abatement board looks normally more to felony crimes to address those ongoing issues that's causing blight in the neighborhood. So while the noise levels are certainly a concern that we deal with in some of the neighborhoods, they're usually not isolated to a location, but mostly vehicle traffic.
Okay, very good, thank you. Yes, sir.
Add to the noise issue, our noise ordinance actually uses a reasonableness standard versus a decibel standard to determine whether something's a noise nuisance. Over the years, a number of times we have looked at switching over to a decibel-based noise ordinance, and there's some challenges to that. It seems like a good idea on the surface, but when you start getting into ambient noise levels and things like that, it becomes more complicated. So we have a reasonableness standard at the moment.
Very good, that's helpful to know. Other questions by commissioners on this item? Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Mayor.
That takes us to resolutions. B1.
B1 is just following up on the equalization rule that is earlier on the agenda. B2 is tied into the certification report, also earlier on the agenda, simply adding the areas that have been annexed into the city over the last year into the certification area that would be exempt from state and regional review of comp plan amendments. Item 3 is just simply...
We have a question on that one, though, from Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Palmer, just for general public knowledge, how many acres did we annex in last year?
Wow, Teresa probably will need to answer that if she's still around.
I'm still here. We annexed in, it was 79.6 acres that consisted of the Orlando Health property.
Thank you.
Then item 3 is a resolution that we do every time we have an election. This is for the upcoming special election that will appoint the city clerk or delegate the authority to the city clerk to hire all necessary poll workers for the election, enter into leases for the polling places for the election, approve the form of the ballot, and then also conduct logic and accuracy testing of the voting equipment. That's a routine thing we do every time we have an election.
Just for edification, are there any questions on that, by the way? Then for edification, City Attorney Davis, you are working, I understand, through the grapevine on the special election itself. What are some of your thoughts that you'd like to see transpire?
Are you talking about changing the charter?
Yes.
Yeah, potentially when a vacancy occurs, simply extending that term to the to the next regular election, so that we can avoid having a special election and then turning around immediately and having a regular election for that process. I mean, one of the things you've got to balance is that if you extend the term of the appointed commissioner, it's in tension with the democratic process of having a duly elected official serving on the commission. But on the other hand, you've got the efficiency issue and the disruption that is caused by multiple elections in a short period of time. That's the primary focus, though, is to simply try to eliminate that inefficiency and disruption.
What kind of term are you thinking about as a minimal?
Yeah, at least get you. I don't know that we would want to extend it beyond half of a term, which is 2 years. And I'll certainly be talking to y'all more about that. And the plan is to have, a charter amendment on the November ballot to clean this up. And we'll probably need to have a workshop where I know we'll have a workshop to discuss all this with you and see what your preferences are.
Good. Well, it's just nice to know you're thinking about it. And Commissioner Selvich has a question, and it's understandable why.
No, since we're going to have a discussion later, I do have some questions. I don't know if I like the idea of an appointed commissioner being in place for 3.5 years. Seems to me that we ought to look more at having a special election 90 days after the departure of an elected official, but he or she doesn't have to run 6 months later. So I was more inclined to think that if you are elected within 1 year of the normal term expiration, you don't have to run again in the standard election. So I just have some reservations, since I am one, of allowing an appointed official to be in office longer than is absolutely necessary.
We consider you the resident expert, but that there is some interest in that. Palmer, what are your thoughts with respect to that other side?
Well, to avoid the person running again will involve extending the term limits, which raises other issues with the electorate. And I think we would need to change at least that component of our term limits in our charter, so that you're starting to get into more controversial territory when you do that. I think one way we could possibly mitigate that issue somewhat is in a situation like Commissioner Franklin's, when we know the resignation is coming, we can schedule the election so that there's no gap in service, no need to appoint an interim commissioner. And I think that would help mitigate that and possibly avoid having to deal with the term limit issue.
And leave the choice to the public, which matters.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the best of both worlds. Commissioner McCarley.
I think the timing is important too. So in my instance, we had a quick special election in January from, I think, the end of October. Commissioner Selvich served maybe beginning of November, all of December, and then I came in the second week of January, or first week, whatever week it was, third week of January. So I think it probably depends on the calendar time, because for me to run that special election and then now be up again this November, that worked really well, I think, having that special then. So there just has to probably be timing caveats on how this works, because it wouldn't be as quickly as what we see right now. And I don't think Commissioner Franklin wanted that to happen. I think he was doing his due diligence to try and see if we could get it on that November ballot so that we would not have to be in the predicament that we're in.
And that's a different issue entirely, because that's Lori Edwards, decision on not wanting to run city elected officials in their raw city time slots. Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Walker.
Did I hear you say, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, did I hear Mr. Palmer Davis say that we will be having a workshop? Because, I fell into that kind of situation similarly when I came into the commission back in 2009, because I was fulfilling someone's slot time period. So, again, we're going to have that kind of question and answer kind of workshop, because I hear what Commissioner McCollum was saying. It's all about timing, I think, that has something to do with how these particular situations come about. But you are saying we will have that discussion soon.
Absolutely. I'm not going to spring a first reading of an ordinance on you on this. I definitely want your input. And I know Kelly also has some tweaks that we may need to make as well. There's some state law changes on how soon absentee ballots go out to military members and that type of thing that may result in us having to change our qualifying period as well. So we're going to look at a number of things, but definitely a workshop before moving forward in an ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate your giving us a little update on that, because we've heard a little things piecemeal, and that helps us see what you're focusing on. So thank you. All right, then that brings us to the C2, right? No, I'm sorry, to utility resolutions and utility 8B1.
The only thing we have left is the resolution establishing the fuel charge for the next quarter, which you'll get a presentation on with the utility committee on Monday.
Okay. Then I think that is it for with respect to the agenda study, comprehensive plan workshop. We need to have a break in between, I would think. Yes. Okay, so it is 10:37. Let's start at 10:50.